Welcome to Taste of Ace. I'm Chef Amy, and good morning. It's a beautiful day here in the neighborhood. We're coming to you from my home kitchen, and today what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate a little bit on the idea of meatless meals, otherwise known as plant-based meals. As you know, for most of us, when we go to the grocery store, certain chains are actually limiting us to just 2 packages of meat when we arrive. So we need to be a little bit more practical on how to make that go a little bit farther. Plant-based is really an excellent nutrition way to eat, but if you live with a carnivore like mine, you better not come home and say, hey, we're going to do some plant-based meals tonight. Not his gig. So the idea is you present it as something a little bit different. Sweetheart, we're going to go to Morocco tonight and we're going to do a delicious Moroccan couscous. My focus today is not just on teaching you how to do a beautiful dish like this, but to give you a little bit of technique and a little bit of background, because it's the technique and the understanding of the food that helps you prepare a more delicious dish. So with that, we're going to focus on the idea of mise en place. Some of you have probably heard the term. It's certainly used on Food Network, but really what it is a fancy French culinary term that means to put in place. And what that means in our recipe is it means for us to do all the things we need to do to get the ingredients ready, so we're not having to stop and start our cooking process. We're good to go. Anytime you get a recipe, there's really 3 times that you should read it. The first is, do I like it? Do I like the ingredients inside? The second is the grocery list. And then the third is to actually, front to back, understand what the process is and to do your mise en place. So today, our mise en place is all about our preparation and measurement first. I'm going to start on the measurements because they're a little bit easier to start with. And then we're going to go to something pretty exciting, at least in my world, and that is knife skills, something that I hold very dear, and really the measure of any young chef that I would come in contact with and decide whether they're worthy of the kingdom. So let's talk about measurement just a little bit. Inside your recipe, you're going to see measurements for dry ingredients and wet ingredients. What I'm bringing forward are 2 of those things. The first is the vegetable stock that's in our recipe. The recipe calls for 1.5 cups of vegetable or chicken stock. I'm going to keep this one plant-based, so we're going to go with vegetable stock. If you'll notice the difference between this and the second measuring cup, this one has a spout on it. Right away, that's a signal this is for something liquid. Liquids are measured in volume. When it comes to dry, notice we have a flat surface. That's so we can use that scraping technique as we've seen before. This measures mass. Very different. I'm not going to take the example today and show you how these would measure out differently, but trust me, you're going to have a very different outcome if you mix these 2 measuring cups. So our cup of couscous, our 1.5 cups of broth. I'm going to set those aside for now. Our other ingredient couldn't get much easier, no prep here. This is simply a 14.5 ounce can of chickpeas, otherwise known as garbanzo beans. I've drained them. I didn't rinse them. The draining helps drain away some of that brine, but I want a little bit of it because it's going to add just a little bit more flavor to my dish. I have 1 dry cup measure of frozen peas. Whether we're dealing with fresh or frozen vegetables, I'm going to suggest to you that you stick with organic. There's enough stuff going on in my little body. I don't need to add anything else to it. And I think it's important that we take good care of ourselves, so organic is another step toward that. What that simply means is we're eliminating those pesticides, so good on all of us. I've also measured all of our dry ingredients as in the spices, because when you read through this recipe, what you'll recognize is they all go in the pool at one time, which is great. Super easy for us. So in here, as you can see by the vibrant colors, I have all the spices of Morocco that are going into this beautiful dish. So in here I have some paprika, I have ground cumin, I have some cinnamon, I have some turmeric, I have a little bit of celery salt, all pre-measured. The exact ingredients, measurements are in your recipe, which we'll talk about at the end as to where you can go find those. I also have that minced garlic as we used last week. You can do fresh or right out of the jar. The idea is we keep this easy. So now we come to the fun part. But you know what? Before we do that, I want to talk a little bit more about that couscous. Just a little bit of a culinary lesson here about how we source food. This is a Moroccan pasta called couscous. If you'll notice, it's very granular, looks a little bit like wet sand, but it's certainly tough like pasta. It's made from durum wheat, so it has protein in it. Talk about the protein in this dish. 6 grams of protein in 1/2 cup. In our chickpeas, we have 13 grams of protein in 1/2 cup. And our beautiful peas have 9 grams of protein. So this dish is loaded with protein that didn't come from an animal. That's why we call it plant-based, right? So very simple. We got all the easy stuff out of the way. Now we're going to do the fun stuff. Let's talk about these vegetables. This dish is a very visual dish when it's served. Vibrant colors and textures. So when I selected what kind of pepper I wanted to use, I thought about the other vegetables I've got on board. I've got my green peas, I've got an orange carrot, I've got a red onion, and I've got these beautiful piquant peppers, which are a brilliant red. We'll talk about those in just a second. So I'm looking at color palette. So I chose yellow. This could be red, this could be orange, it could even be green. You won't find me using a green pepper very often. I find that they're a little tough to digest later on, so I don't need dinner revisiting, so I prefer to use one that I like and adds the color that I'm looking for. Just a quick little tip on how to cut these. Often when we do one of these, we end up with seeds everywhere. So the idea is, how can we do this easily, efficiently, and come up with something that we're all going to enjoy. So, like apples and a lot of stone fruits, peppers have shoulders on them. Those shoulders are nature's way of telling us that the seeds are just inside there. And if we're smart and you cut the right way, we're not going to have all that cleanup that we need to do. I'm going to do one knife safety piece with this and show you, make sure that this doesn't run away on you. Here we go. So the first step is, I'm going to take my nice kitchen knife. I'm going to just slice the bottom off because that gives me a nice stable spot to work with. I'm going to use those shoulders as my guide. I'm going to cut right down. Look at that. Beautiful plank, no seeds. My seeds are still inside my pepper. Real quickly, I'm going to go all the way around my pepper. When I get to that last side, I'm going to lay it on its side so I don't risk myself or my fingers. And there you go. My seed pod is all together. What we want to do when we cut is we want to use the cut side, because with a pepper, it's going to slide right off that slick surface. So my first cut is just to get these in nice strips. I'll just do a couple there so you can see. The idea is that when we do our cuts, we want everything to match, because when we take a bite of this later, we want to have everything in a bite. That's what makes a complex bite and makes us go, wow, this is great. Otherwise, it just looks kind of hodgepodge, so we want to do the right thing. So how do I know what the right size is? Easy. I take a chickpea. Okay, now I know that I want everything that same size. I'm going to put my chickpea back so he doesn't get lost on my board. Up on the tip of my knife, and down I go. Just nice and simple. And there you go. I've got my peppers. I'm not going to do that whole pepper because I've got a couple of others I want you to see. Don't worry that what I'm doing is throwing these down. What I'm doing is saving them later for a salad. My husband may not like plant-based foods, but I should. So now let's take a look at our carrot. Just your humble carrot. Again, organic. You could do heirloom. The beautiful heirlooms come in magenta and yellow and other beautiful colors. You don't need to peel this bad boy. We're not doing a finished glazed carrot dish, so let's get the nutrients that are in that peel. Our first step is to cut off our ends. Easy. Now what we want to do is make this manageable. So I'm going to cut it into smaller pieces. This I can manage versus that long carrot. But this is dangerous on my cutting board, so I need to get it to a flat surface. I'm going to cut it in half. So notice, now it doesn't go anywhere. I'm going to cut it in half one more time. And now that that's cut, I'm going to go back and cut into the same piece size as my beautiful peppers were done. Just that simple. So I'm going to put those in my salad bowl later. Let's talk about our red onion. I've selected a red onion for this dish because I want the visual prettiness of it. When cooked, red onions and yellow onions taste identical. There is no difference. When you want to make a different choice for something raw, when you do raw onions, a raw yellow or white onion has a very intense flavor. The red onion's a little bit less intense. So let's talk about the right way to cut an onion. This is a part of the video when you're rewatching it later that you may want to slow down so that you can see. I'm going to move through it fairly quickly so that we can all learn and keep on. The idea is we want to keep the hairy end of the onion intact as much as we can so that the onion doesn't fall apart while we're prepping it. We also don't want this to roll away, because remember, anything round rolls, and if it's round, rolls away, we're putting ourselves at risk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grip this onion, take my knife, and just drag it through. I've got my beautiful hairy end. I'm going to go ahead, slice down the opposite end, the stem end, so that I can get rid of that peel. Now I'm going to peel back that beautiful onion skin. If it stays on, great back here, because it kind of gives me a nice little handle to work with. I'm going to use the palm of my hand that's concave to hold my bulb, fingers up where I can see them, and on the horizon, I'm going to slice back toward that root ball without going through it, and gently pull my knife out. Now I'm going to go this way with my knife, and I'm going to cut toward the root ball, but not through it. Now, that slicing you've been wanting to do can happen. Down it goes. And just like that, I magically have my beautifully shaped onion pieces. So we're going to go through a whole onion in that same manner for this dish. Our last little bit of prep for our vegetables are these beautiful little piquant peppers. Aren't these the cutest little guys? They're called piquant because they combine sweet and heat together. Even though the jar, I've got one for you here, says mild, heads up, ladies and gentlemen, these are spicy. So even the mild packs quite a bit of spice to it. So in this, what I would also suggest is you might want to shop for this one online. Most of the markets in our local areas, so this is a fairly expensive jar of peppers. Online, they're about half price. So just a quick heads up. They make a great hors d'oeuvre, by the way. You can stuff that opening with goat cheese or cream cheese or just some manchego cheese, and you've got a very simple hors d'oeuvre. All I want to do is cut these little guys in half, just in half, because any smaller, they'll get lost. So we'll go ahead and get a couple of those done. I think our recipe calls for 6 of these, actually. 5, and 1 more. All right, so that's ready to go. We've got the hard part done. Everything is ready to go. This dish couldn't come together much more easily. What I've done while I was waiting for all of you to come by today is I started this dish and actually have that beautiful mixture of peas. The peas are actually in here as well. We've got our peas, we've got our peppers, our parsley, etc. are all in here getting ready to go. I'm going to let this warm up just a little bit, and while it does, I'm going to do that parsley because I forgot to show you the parsley. Last week we talked about Italian parsley and why I prefer Italian parsley. If you want to throw this recipe just a little bit differently, you could also use chopped cilantro. Chops the same way, and it's going to add that extra element. That's something special. So we've got our bunch. This is already cleaned, as in I washed it earlier and dried it because I don't want to wet chop where it all mashes together. Because if I do that, all the oils from the parsley are going to go into my cutting board and not into my dish. So now that everybody is together, excuse me, let me rinse this knife a little bit. I've got some onions hanging on. And away we go. I've bunched it up, tip of my knife, and just like that, I've got my chopped parsley. I don't want a fine chop on this. I just want a nice, beautiful, leafy chop because I want to be able to see it when it's done. All right, I can hear this heating up a little bit, so here comes the fun part. Our peas are already in. I'm going to add my chickpeas right in the pool. And I'm also going to add these beautiful fragrant spices. In they go. Now, you want to stir this around just a little bit until it gets nice and fragrant. And what I mean by fragrant is an aroma. You're going to smell Morocco in your house for just a hot minute. Cumin and paprika and garlic and all kinds of other delicious things. Speaking of garlic, I forgot to put it in, didn't I? Here we go with our garlic, and that's simply heating up. I can hear it sizzling, I can smell it a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this beautiful stock. In it goes. Hear it sizzle just a little bit. And once that comes up to a nice medium simmer, which is just going to take a second, or there, believe it or not, I'm going to take this gorgeous couscous. And this stuff is magical. All I have to do is add it to my pot. I'm going to stir. Set these aside, put a lid on it, and I'm going to turn my heat off, sliding it off the heat. It sits for 5 minutes, and at the end of 5 minutes, my dish is done. Just as quick and simple as that. Think of all the beautiful things and nutrients and proteins we're getting into the family. We don't need to tell them that. When you're asked later, hey, what is this? Just what it is. It's a Moroccan couscous. If your husband or somebody in the family says, what kind of meat is this? Just smile and find a distracting way to end the conversation. It's absolutely wonderful. I'd like to show you the finished dish. Here we go. I've got one that I prepared earlier. You can hold in a warm oven for just a little bit. I'm going to fluff this back up with a fork. Your recipe actually calls for us to fluff this up. This beautiful bowl is actually a gift from a friend, actually down in Austin. So shout out, guys. Thank you for this beautiful bowl. Look at the colors in that. Beautiful way to serve it. I'm just going to fluff it up. Look at the vibrancy of the color. It's just absolutely gorgeous with all of our chopped vegetables, etc. Now that we've fluffed, just to make sure that it's got that extra something, because we don't want to, serve a meal without making it pretty. Just a little bit more of that chopped parsley or a nice leaf of parsley right on top. And like this, we have a beautiful meal. This is meant to serve a family of 4, and I think it'll do beautifully. With that, our time has come to an end. It's been wonderful to spend some time with you. Next week, we're going to have a guest, Pat Doler, who's going to come in and show us a beautiful lemon bar. For this recipe, make sure that you look in the description of our recipe found at the here on the link for YouTube. And with that, we'll see you next week. We have started an inbox so that you can send us a message. So drop us a note at at adultedventura.edu. That information is also found in the description. We hope to hear from you. Have a great week. Stay safe and be well.